You think you know someone the moment they step into your store. You think a simple hello is harmless, but sometimes the first word someone says can change everything. Angela Thompson walked into a small bookstore downtown, expecting nothing more than to find a rare book she had been searching for weeks. She had planned this morning meticulously, waking early, choosing her outfit carefully, feeling that rare mix of anticipation and calm that accompanies someone on a mission. The air outside was crisp, carrying the faint scent of coffee and wet pavement. Even the city's hum seemed subdued, almost respectful, as though it knew she had a purpose. But in less than 10 seconds, she heard words that would stop her heart. Words meant to humiliate, to push her out, to remind her the color of her skin. Your kind isn't welcome here. Those 4 words hit harder than a punch. Her stomach knotted. Her hands tightened instinctively on the straps of her bag. The familiar comfort of the morning seemed to dissolve instantly, replaced by a cold, sharp tension that ran down her spine. And yet, by the time the store owner realized who she really was, it was too late, because Angela wasn't just a customer. She held the power to change his life forever. It had been a slow morning. The small bookstore, tucked snugly between a coffee shop and a florist, smelled of old paper, dust, and the faint scent of polished wood. Soft sunlight filtered to the large front windows, painting the wooden floor in golden streaks, and catching motes of dust floating lazily in the air. The low hum of the heating system added a subtle vibration, almost like the building itself was alive, listening. Angela had visited before. She remembered the warm greeting from the owner, the quiet nods from the staff, the comforting familiarity of aisles lined with stories of lives she'd never lived but always imagined. The smell of the old books, the smooth leather of their spines, the faint creak of the floorboards under her feet. All of it had felt like home. But today, something fell off. The store was emptier than usual, unnaturally so. Only the owner, a man named Greg, stood behind the counter, polishing the glass display case that held first editions and rare manuscripts. The rhythmic sound of his cloth against glass seemed almost meditative, until he looked up. His smile, once polite, did not reach his eyes. Something in his posture was tense, rigid, as if the mere sight of Angela triggered an internal alarm. Angela paused at the threshold, noticing how the air seemed heavier here than outside. She could feel it, a subtle shift, the kind that tells you immediately when something is wrong. Her mind briefly wandered to the first time she had stepped into the store, how safe and welcome she had felt, and the contrast now made her pulse quicken, sharp as a warning bell. Angela approached the history section, her eyes scanning for a first edition of the Souls of Black Folk she had seen on a previous visit. The books were lined neatly, the spines shining in the morning light. She reached out, her fingers brushing against the worn leather cover, feeling the faint indentations of years of hands that had turned these pages before hers. But before she could even touch it, Greg's voice cut the quiet air, sharp as a whip. "You're not welcome here." Angela froze. Her body went rigid, her heartbeat thudding in her ears. The words weren't just rude. They carried weight, an old bitterness, an invisible line being drawn in the air, almost palpable. She glanced at him, trying to mask the shock with a calm she did not entirely feel. I'm here to look for a book," she said carefully, keeping her tone even, her posture composed, though inside, a storm of disbelief and anger swirled. Greg leaned forward, his face hardening, his eyes narrowing as if her very presence violated a rule he had imagined. "I said, your kind isn't welcome." The warmth of the morning seemed to vanish. The soft sunlight fell harsh, the smell of paper suddenly acrid. Angela felt every nerve in her body tense up. She had encountered discrimination before, yes, subtle, quiet, and sometimes violent. But this sudden, audacious act in what had always been a safe, quiet space felt like a trap she hadn't seen coming. She could almost hear the echo of other places where she'd been told she did not belong, and a low, simmering resolve began to rise inside her. Angela took a deep breath. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten. She simply reached into her bag, pulling out a small business card. She slid it across the counter with calm, deliberate hands. "Did you know," she said softly, "that you're speaking the owner of this building?" Greg's face twisted. Confusion, disbelief, and then anger flickered across his features in rapid succession. His eyes darted around, as if searching for a hidden camera, a joke he hadn't been told he was part of. That's impossible. I've been managing this store for years, he stammered, his voice betraying panic beneath the practiced composure he had worn for so long. Angela didn't flinch. She could almost hear the tiny cracks forming in his ego, the subtle unraveling of authority he had assumed for so many years. She allowed herself a single, measured glance around the store, taking the polished counters, the carefully arranged bookshelves, the neat stacks that he had maintained so obsessively. Every inch of the space had been hers, yet treated as if it belonged to someone else. I bought this building 5 years ago, she continued, her voice calm but deliberate. Every brick, every shelf, every light fixture in here belongs to me. And yet here you are, telling me I don't belong. The silence that followed was deafening. Angela could feel the power of the moment stretching between them. Greg's mind raced, pride, ego, embarrassment, confusion, each one competing for dominance. Every second Angela stood there, serene and composed. He felt smaller. I didn't know, he muttered, his words weak, faltering. Angela smiled, not a happy smile, but a quiet, cutting one. It was the kind that announces, power is present whether recognized or not. She paused deliberately, letting the weight of her gaze press against him like a quiet hammer. I see. Well, now you do, she said, letting the weight of her words hang in the sunlight like dust motes. I've been more than patient, Greg, but today, this ends differently. Every movement Angela made now was precise, measured. She didn't yell. She didn't escalate. She simply asked him to step aside while she reviewed the lease agreements. The subtle authority in her posture, the steady calm in her voice, exposed every assumption he had made about control, privilege, and entitlement. Greg swallowed hard. His hands trembled slightly. Every instinct screamed at him to regain control, but the truth was undeniable. The authority he thought he wielded was nothing more than an illusion, shattered instantly by one quiet, unassuming woman. He began to notice the absurdity of his own tone earlier, how his words had carried the weight of decades of unchecked assumptions. You see, Angela said, her voice firm, the world doesn't owe you respect. You earn it through how you treat people. And today you failed. As she reviewed the papers, Greg's face went pale, tight with guilt. He realized painfully that the woman he had tried to humiliate was not just any customer. She was a landlord, the authority, the person who determined the fate of the very business he had managed for years. Angela left the store that day with a sense of quiet justice. She didn't shout. She didn't humiliate. She let the natural consequences of his actions play out. The morning sun warmed her face as she stepped outside, carrying the familiar scent of pages and ink with her, a silent emblem of patience rewarded and respect reclaimed. Greg, left behind, could only stare at the empty space she had vacated. The realization of his arrogance crashed over him like waves, relentless and unavoidable. No court, no confrontation. Just the undeniable truth that power and respect aren't given. They are recognized, earned, or ignored until it's too late. Angela didn't linger in anger. She moved forward, the morning light catching the edges of her coat as she stepped onto the street. She had won, not through rage or violence, but through the quiet force of presence and truth. Sometimes the smallest spaces, a bookstore, a coffee shop, a hallway, an office, become arenas for lessons people desperately need to learn. Those who wield authority without awareness are often first to be humbled when reality catches up. The smell of old books, the muted rustle of pages, the faint scent of polished wood. Each became witnesses to a lesson he would not forget. Angela's story is a reminder. Power is not about shouting. Influence is not about anger. True authority lies in action, integrity, and letting the natural consequences of human behavior unfold. In the end, Greg's lesson was clear. The world sees everything. Every insult, every attempt to diminish another is noted, and karma, whether swift or quiet, always arrives. And just when you think Angela's story ended that morning, there's a twist that no one could predict. A rival businessman, observing from the shadows, decides to test her authority in ways even she couldn't foresee. But that's a story for another day.